Hey everyone, in today's Weird Science, we're going to be talking about another spooky topic, and that's dead bodies. So I am going to be showing some pictures of some anciently recovered dead bodies, but hopefully nothing too spooky in this Weird Science. But if dead bodies gross you out, you may want to stay away from this one. Alright, let's get started. So how long does it actually take a body to fully decompose? And where did a dead body like this one come from? We'll have the answers later on in this video. A human body buried in a coffin can take up to 8 to 12 years to decompose down to the skeletal remains. But of course, this can vary due to a lot of environmental factors like temperature, the availability of oxygen, body size, clothing, the cause of death, the location, climate, and the success of any types of preservation techniques. Now, if you're interested in studying dead bodies or learning a little bit more about preservation and identifying remains, you may be interested in a field called forensic anthropology. Now, this is a type of applied anthropology that specializes in the changes of the human body for the purposes of legal inquiry. If you're more interested in the medical side of things and the causes of diseases and death, you might be interested in a field called pathology. And that's the science of the cause and effects of diseases. A forensic pathologist might be the one identifying the cause of death, for example, the disease or illness or injury that caused someone to die. Usually a pathologist is the one who determines the time of death, which can be done most accurately within 24 hours of someone dying. Usually this will include using indicators such as rigor mortis, algor mortis, and liver mortis. What are those? Now, rigor mortis is the rigidity of skeletal muscles after death, and it's when the body's going to stiffen up for a certain period of time after it has died. Algor mortis is the cooling rate of the body after death. Typically, if we're looking at a crime scene, the forensic investigators will try to take both a body temperature internally at the liver site or rectally. Now, there's an interesting equation that's used for the cooling period of a body after death. Now, the cooling rate of a dead body can vary a lot due to the temperature of the surrounding environment, the clothing, the body's size, wetness of the environment, or even different layers that are around it. Rigor mortis, on the other hand, is a little bit more specific, but it's only applicable for a short period of time. The skeletal muscles will stiffen between 3 and 30 hours. After 30 hours, the body becomes more malleable, and rigor mortis is no longer a good indicator of time of death. Liver mortis is an interesting indicator for the position that the body is in right after it died. This is the settling of blood after death, which results in a reddish or purplish pattern depending on the position that the body is in at the time of death. And lividity, or that purplish or reddish color, will become fixed between 10 and 15 hours after death. So once that milestone is hit, the lividity is not going to change, even if the body's moved to another location. Now, there's a lot of interesting ways that scientists can determine the age of an individual if the remains are a little bit older or it's difficult to determine who the body is. The most accurate determinations of age are from teeth. Scientists can also use different growth plates in the bones, as well as looking at things like cranial sutures as to see if certain bones have fused together to determine the age of an individual. Investigators usually determine an age range because it's difficult to tell just from skeletal remains how old an individual exactly was. Now, in vertebrates, there are 5 main stages of decay. We're going to go through each one of these and what happens, so hopefully you won't get too grossed out at this point. Alright, fresh decay is right after death, and this is when rigor mortis will set in, lividity starts to occur, but there's not too much else going on as far as outside organisms interacting. Now, the microorganisms in the gut are going to start to multiply at this point, which will lead to the next stage, which we call bloat. At this point, the microbes that live inside your body are actually going to start to digest human tissue, and they're going to produce gases. This will also start to produce that foul death smell, which are the chemicals that are the byproducts of the microbes' digestion. There can be discoloration at this point, and the gases will continue to escape even as the skin starts to bloat out. In active decay, tissues are going to start to liquefy, and the skin can get a darker color. This is where the insects really start to come in. Blowflies are going to go to corpses, and then maggots will start to populate the dead body. At this point, scientists can determine how long the body has been dead based on the age and the size of the different insects that appear. In advanced decay, most of the remains have become discolored or dark colored or even blackened, and the liquidization of almost all of the tissues is almost complete. There's also a lot of beetles at this point. Now, after active decay, most things start to dry out and the body starts to skeletonize. This means only bones and connective tissue remain. There can be huge variations in this process depending on the different conditions the body is in at death and the environmental conditions as the body decays. But a normal human body exposed to the elements at 50 degrees could take up to 4 months to complete this entire process. When archaeologists find old bodies, most surviving human remains consist of skeletal and dental material alone. Now let's talk about some interesting ways humans have actually tried to preserve bodies or accidentally preserve bodies that I find fascinating. We're going to go through mummification, ice preservation, and of course my favorite, bog bodies. Now you might have heard of traditional Egyptian mummification in your history classes or some other time, and it involves gutting of a lot of the internal organs of the corpse as well as washing it with different solutions like wine, which actually helps with the bacterial part of the decay. As part of the process, the body is dried out and then wrapped in different linens, which also prevents water damage and other decay. There's of course lots of different types of mummification that have been found around the world. One of the oldest types of mummification is chinchorro mummification from Latin America. Now the way these individuals were preserved is that arms and legs were removed, organs were scooped out, the skin was removed and then later put back on, and hot coals were shoved in the body cavity in order to dry out the cadaver. Again, removing a lot of the tissues that would later decay if exposed to certain environmental factors and left to degrade with bacteria. Now you might have heard of different ice mummies being found. These can be individuals who died accidentally in the ice or were buried in the ice. But when an individual dies in conditions where there's lots of snow and ice, it's really hard for insects or bacteria to decompose or attack the dying remains. So cells are sometimes frozen in place, and there's really a very slow rate of decomposition. One of the best ways to preserve a body, though, is to put it in a bog. Peat bogs have exquisite body preservation properties because of the lack of oxygen. This helps prevent microorganisms from decomposing the skin and other tissues. Within the bog, hair doesn't degrade, clothing sometimes is remained, and the skin turns leathery but stays on the individual. There have been bog bodies found that are up to 6,000 years old. One of my favorite bog sites and one of the most important archaeological sites that scientists have ever found is the Windover site in Florida. Here, 168 individuals were found buried in peat at the bottom of a pond, and their skeletons were so well preserved because of the peat and the bog conditions. What's even more remarkable about this site was that within the skulls of some of the individual, there was actually brain tissue found. Scientists were able to perform DNA testing with the tissue at this site, and there were even gut contents found in some of the burials. Archaeologists and forensic anthropologists were even able to determine lots about the diet and the lifestyles of these individuals from over 5,000 years ago. So I encourage you to look up more about bog bodies, mummies, even ice preservation of dead bodies, or anything related to forensic anthropology. If you have a question, put it in the comments below, and thanks so much for watching our weird science on dead bodies.